y equals 2 cos 3 theta minus pi over 4 plus 1. What I'm going to do first is just label all the components so that we can figure out the scale for the x and y axis. So the amplitude is 2 and the vertical displacement is up 1. So that means the maximum value is vertical displacement plus the amplitude. So 1 plus 2 is 3. The minimum value is the vertical displacement minus the amplitude. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. So I know I got to go from -1 to 3, which isn't super far apart. So I'm just going to make the y-axis a little bigger. So I'm going to go every 2 squares is 1 unit for the y-axis. I'll just label the y-axis now. So I'm just going to go every 2 squares and label 4, and then same thing going down, every 2 squares, and then I'll label -4. Those are the vertical components. Now we'll move on to the horizontal ones. So the phase shift of this is pi over 4 to the right, and the period is 2 pi divided by 3. For graphing though, what we really want are the key points, and that's going to be pi divided by 2 times b, which is 3. So pi over 2 times 3 is pi over 6, is how far apart our key points are going to be. Now we need to find a scale so that we can get the phase shift of pi over 4 and the period of pi over 6. So the common denominator for pi over 4 and pi over 6 is 24. So I'm going to use a scale of pi over 24. The problem with a scale of pi over 24 is you need 24 squares just to get to pi. So instead, I know that half of that is 12 squares. So I'm just going to label pi over 2 and negative pi over 2. So I know it's just 12 squares to the right is pi over 2, and 12 squares to the left is negative pi over 2. Now I'm going to set everything up to graph. First thing I'm going to do is dot in my vertical displacement, 1 up. And then above and below that, I'm going to dot in the amplitude. Now I can start converting all my horizontal pieces to a scale of 24. So that key points are pi over 6 apart, but in 24ths, I just multiply top and bottom by 4, and I get 4 pi over 24. The phase shift is pi over 4 to the right, but I have to multiply that by top and bottom by 6. So I get the phase shift is actually 6 pi over 24 to the right. So that means it's going to be 6 squares to the right. All right, so that vertical line is the phase shift, which is just 6 squares to the right. And now I know it's a cosine curve, which starts at the maximum, and each of the next points is going to be 4 squares apart because the key points are 4 pi over 24 apart, which just tells me every 4 squares. And you're just following the pattern. So starting from that maximum, it goes high, middle, high. To the right, we kind of run out of space, go to the left. It's going to go high, middle, high, middle, low, and then draw it in. Try not to forget the arrows, and we are done.